I've said, it doesn't hide that he killed that Egyptian in anger who was beating a Hebrew slave, and fear gets into him. And of course, when fear gets into people, it really does paralyze. You know, when Elijah, he had done a great work, and he'd stood up for God, and he was on the Mount Carmel, and they offered the sacrifice, and they called down fire, and it burns everything up, and the prophets of Baal are given a thorough beating and defeat that day. But just after that, fear gets into him when he has the sense of Ahab's wife Jezebel is after him. And although in the past he's faced Jezebel and didn't seem to be too fazed by it, there comes a point when suddenly he's paralyzed with fear by what this woman might do to him. Fear is the opposite to faith, and it's very easy to be fearful. We know that circumstances can befall us and we can be consumed with fear. We know that different events can challenge us and we can find ourselves giving in to fear. But this chapter is about people who, even if they had moments when fear overtook them, when Abraham was afraid about getting killed if they knew that Sarah was his wife, all of these things, these fears are real, but faith was stronger. Faith was of a greater reality. And it's just interesting how this chapter throws up a few people who are only given a brief mention in other places, that the walls of Jericho fall down. Rahab is spared because against all the odds, she knows that God is with these invaders, and she wants to be on the side of this God rather than on the side of the people living in Jericho. And you have mentioned again Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, David, Samuel, and so many people. But then the writer just goes into quite a powerful, moving list of people who suffer. People who are beaten, people who are killed, put to the sword, people who die and are brought back to life, people who are flogged, people who are chained, people who are put in prison, people who were stoned, people who were sawed in two, people who were put to death, people who went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted. Well, what the writer is swiftly kind of concluding is that all these people, what was significant was not just their sufferings and their pain and the awful, awful things that some of them had to handle, but it was their faith. They didn't compromise their faith. Despite being treated by others in the most despicable and horrible manner, they still believed that God's way was best. And even if they were not to experience in their lifetime everything that God was able to do, that didn't mean that they stopped trusting him. They believed that if they didn't taste everything on this earth, they would taste it in the heaven to come. Such was their faith. They didn't feel that others were being treated, especially if they saw some of God's blessings and saw some of the things that he promised work out in their generation and time. And if they didn't, that didn't stop them trusting God. Our trust in God needs to be unaffected by time, unaffected by history, unaffected by our circumstances, unaffected by our trials, our health, or whatever else. We simply, whatever is going on, say, God's ways are best, we're trusting him, we're looking to him, and we will not turn away from him. Verse 38 is very powerful. These people wandering around, it seems, in a hopeless situation, but although geographically their situation seemed so difficult, logistically their situation seemed so difficult, what is true is that they trusted God. We read, none of them received what had been promised. God had planned something better for us, that only together with us would they be made perfect. You see, so much was happening before Jesus came, but these men and women in the Old Testament, their complete devotion to the living God, God isn't going to overlook that. They didn't have the revelation that we have today. They didn't have an experience of the Holy Spirit as we can have today. But what they had was enough to say we trust God, and they trusted him, and that is commended by God. Today, as I bring this program to a close, I want to ask about your faith. Where is your faith? Where is your trust? Are you someone watching this program today filled with fear or with faith? Let's open our eyes to see who our God is. Let's open our Bibles again and read who our God is. He is the God who never changes. He is the God who is everywhere. He's the God who knows everything. He's the God who is all-powerful. He's the God whose plans are not affected by the weather or by history or by a dynasty or some group reigning or ruling in a country at this moment. God's plans do not change. He is the God who's demonstrated he understands what it's like to suffer and endure in this world. He came in the person of Jesus. Let's put our hand in him. Whatever you're handling today, trust in God, and he will see you through. He will never let you down. In this life he will strengthen you, and you're heading for eternity with him, which is far better. God bless you.